Hi, my name is Michelle Labrosse. I was actually born in 1987, and I went vegan in 2012. What happened, it's actually a really big story. I was born vegan, and I think we're all born vegan at the end of the day, right? But we're then conditioned. We're conditioned to move away from veganism. We're conditioned to move away from respecting all life. I'm sure you've heard this example before. If you were to put a baby in a crib and there was, a wild tiger or any other animal, maybe even just a nice cute little piglet and a carrot, the child is not going to try and bite the piglet. It is actually going to play and caress and embrace, and it's gonna possibly eat the carrot and maybe even give the carrot to the pig. So at the end of the day, it's like we are all born vegan, and then we just move away from that depending on the conditioning that we get from society around us or from our parents, right? And just from our environment. Like we're basically a product of our environment. So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, when my parents told me that this was, and I was probably younger than that, but this is what I'm sort of remembering. I remember having a conversation with my parents around, what is this? And they were like, it's chicken. And I was like the animal, like the chickens? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, and I was like, why is he in my plate? Like, what's happening here? And they're like, well, we have to kill the chicken for you to have protein, because if you don't have protein, you're going to die. And I believed it, right? Like I questioned it so much. I was like, but why would we do that? Why would he? Because I didn't understand the whole concept of needing protein at that age. But my parents thought they knew better. And they didn't really go out of their way to research and find out other alternatives or other options. And that was a very, very long time ago. I was born in 1987. So that was maybe in like 1995, right? And so the journey went along, and eventually in 2011, I woke up and I had lost 50% of strength on my whole right side body. I literally just fell out of bed. And I was like, okay, what is happening? Because at that point in time, everything I did was physical. I was a mixed martial artist and I was waitressing. Everything I did was on my feet and or carrying objects, whether it was, punching, kicking, or bringing food to people. And interestingly enough, it was not vegan food, right? And I had worked in restaurants most of my life. I even worked in a steak frit and stuff like that. So I was very, cognitive dissonance is real. Once you get kind of brainwashed or conditioned to think a certain way, you stop thinking about all of the animals that are suffering. You stop thinking about oppression, right? You just start thinking about me, my, mine. So it didn't take too long when I went to emergency to find out that after testing and all sorts of stuff that I had multiple sclerosis. So they diagnosed me with MS, which is, if you don't know what MS is, it's an autoimmune disease, and it's your immune system that attacks your nervous system. And your nervous system, actually, so if you think of your CNS, like your central nervous system, which is your brain and a spinal cord, it is all protected, right? It's protected. And our spinal cord is protected with our spine. And it's really, really important for us to have health in our spine and movement in our spine, which is what I teach today, but we'll get back to that after. Literally, if you think about it, the myelin sheath that protects our central nervous system is actually almost the same molecular structure as dairy. And I was a huge dairy consumer. Like, I used to even joke about the fact that I drank more milk than baby cows. And without actually understanding that baby cows were stolen from their mother and they didn't even get to drink any milk, right? So it was much more truer than I even believed it myself. Like, I thought it was funny, but it's really not funny when you realize that it's true, right? So when I started doing research and understanding that the molecular structure of my myelin sheath was very similar to that of dairy, I realized I need to get rid of dairy. Dairy's a culprit. Like, clearly my body is attacking something. I'm having dairy in my body all the time, whether it's yogurt, whether it's cheese, whether it was like 3 bags of milks every 2 days. Like, it was insanity how much dairy I consumed. And so it goes to show, no wonder my body started attacking itself. It didn't understand dairy's a pathogen and it's super inflammatory, right? So my research went further than that. I was lucky at that time because I was a mixed martial artist, the coach that I had, so I used to train at TriStar in Montreal. I don't know if you know a little bit about UFC and MMA and stuff, but Faraz Zahabi is a world-renowned coach. He owns TriStar. TriStar is a beautiful gym. GSP, like Georges St-Pierre, Mike Ricci, Olivier Aubin, Cajun Zons, like those are all key UFC fighters that train from that gym. And I was lucky because my coach actually was raised in a reserve near Vancouver in Burns Lake, and he had learned holistic ways to heal naturally. So when I was diagnosed with MS and when my neurologists were telling me I needed to inject myself with interferon for the rest of my life at 24 years old, he gave me other alternatives. He was like, Michelle, please make sure that you do your research. Make sure that you get a second opinion. He was like, you know that the dairy consumption, he had already been on my case about dairy. He'd already been telling me like, it's not natural, it comes from another species, like why are you putting excess amounts like that in your body? And so at the end of the day, none of this information was like fully new. So when I actually got diagnosed and this reality was hitting me, I was like, okay, I need to do something. And I didn't want it to be medication. I didn't want to be on medication for the rest of my life. So I was like, what can I do first? Can I just use this as, if everything goes wrong, I'll go down that route. But for now, what can I do, right? What can I do holistically for myself? So I started doing my own research and I came across Dr. Swank's diet. I don't know if you ever heard about that, but that's specifically catered towards MS. So Dr. Roy Swank, he actually got diagnosed a long time ago, and he initially started taking the medication and still ended up wheelchair bound, and then started asking questions like, why, right? Why, if I'm taking the medication, why am I now wheelchair bound? Why is my disease progressing? So he started looking at other alternatives, at other ways of healing himself. And he came across the power of food, right? And not just food, he actually realized that all of the countries in North America, or most of the predominant countries that had meat and dairy as the bulk of the diet, were the ones that had immune disease, immune disorders. And all of the ones that were mainly focused on plants, or the ones that had fish, like for example, the Mediterranean diet, these were the ones that didn't have immune disease. So he literally researched and realized, wow, like this is a huge part. Like ever since, like there was an uprising in autoimmune diseases in all of the countries that were predominant in meat and dairy. So he realized, I need to start cutting that down, which he did. So his whole technique was reducing it to 15 grams of saturated fats and per day, which very much limits it, right? Like that's not big pieces of animals and things like that. It's very, very small portions. And so technically his idea, like he's saying no red meat, no pigs, of course he says pork, he says maybe a little bit of fish, maybe a little bit of chicken back then when it was lean, right? Because let's think about it right now, they're not saying it, but there's actually more fat in chicken than there is protein. Like it's not a protein source anymore, Like we've bred them so much into existence that there's actually more fat than protein. So why are we still calling it a protein source, right? And people are wondering why they're suffering. But anyway, so at the end of the day, when I saw all of this research, I thought to myself, okay, I need to adopt this diet. And so I started, but the first thing I did, because he still gave like, okay, you could have a bit of skim milk, you could have a bit of this, like he was giving exceptions. And I just decided like, I'm just cutting it all out. So I got rid of all dairy, and it took me less than 3 weeks to start clearing up my skin, to start clearing up my sinuses. And back then, I used to smoke cigarettes. And I thought that the cigarettes, well, I mean, they are a culprit, don't get me wrong, I quit that too. But cigarettes, I thought were the reason I had such blockages in my sinuses, and I was waking up every morning all stuffed up and mucousy, right? But at the end of the day, it was because of the dairy. It was the dairy, and we all know now that dairy, not only is it a huge inflammatory product, but it's also very mucus forming. It's very phlegm forming. So no wonder it took less than 3 weeks for me to clear all that up, right? And so it was just the things and the changes that I was experiencing from letting go of animal products was incredible. And then I kept my research as well because I understood that food is a big part of the picture, but taking care of ourselves in multiple different ways is too, right? So making sure that we're getting daily movement, making sure that we're hydrating ourselves with some filtered water, making sure that even the food we're eating is preferably organic if we can, right? Because they are doing just very nasty things when it comes to genetically modified foods and Monsanto and what they're doing to all those foods. So it's really important to look at how much chemicals you have in your life. When I went back to the Institute of Holistic Nutrition once I've healed myself and I'm feeling better, I wanted to learn more how I could help others, right? So I knew that I needed a little bit more. I could do all my own, Dr. Google research, but I wanted to have like a paper. I wanted to have more of a guided kind of structure. And actually we had some of Dr. Michael Greger's work. That's how I learned about his How Not to Die and all that kind of stuff, which is amazing. It was very interesting in this school. It was very interesting because there was two paradoxes. There was like the teachers that believed in the vegan lifestyle, and then there were the teachers that were more on like this carnivore type of diet, right? Or that believed more in like, oh no, you need like to have animals, but the free range, the this, the that, like trying to promote the healthy versions, which we all know are not, right? It was very interesting, and it didn't take me long to realize, okay, I can help others right now because I'm understanding the functioning of the body. And one of the biggest stories that I learned there that I will take with me forever is literally thinking about your body as a barrel. I know it's a weird example, but imagine your body being a barrel, and imagine in that barrel, there's just so much things you could put in the barrel. Eventually, that barrel is going to start spilling over, right? So I was at the point, being diagnosed with MS, I was at the point where I filled up that barrel so much that it was overflowing, and that's why I ended up almost paralyzed on one side of my body. That's why I ended up having all of these different symptoms. And it was because I had filled my barrel so much with poison, which could have been which was the food I was feeding myself, which, let's just remember, I was a mixed martial artist, but we used to eat at McDonald's, at Harvey's, at La Belle Province, there was all these like fast food joints around where we trained. So we'd finish like an intense 2-3 hour workout and training, like whether it's jiu-jitsu, MMA, grappling, wrestling, and then we'd go and eat all of this really disgusting food, So you're not fueling your body properly at all. And then you wonder why all these people are suffering with injuries. It's because you're literally building your body in a way that is destructive. So imagine that barrel being full, whether it's a whole bunch of toxic foods, whether it's you're dehydrated, whether it's because you're not sleeping enough, whether it's because you're surrounded with toxic relationships, right? It could be people that instead of uplifting you, bring you down, the Debbie Downers kind of thing. Again, there's so many different things. You might not even think of breathing properly. Like most people, I even heard a story recently, my marketing girl was breathing so shallowly that she actually locked herself in. Like her diaphragm got locked in, her diaphragm. So she had to get it adjusted to be able to breathe more. And, in a society built on like flight or fight responses, because we're oh so ever stimulated, and there's all these poisons around us everywhere, right? In this consumerism world, most of us breathe very shallowly. So just breath. Just knowing that like we have access to our breath, we can always, and even in the industry that we're in as activists, right? It's like we always need to be able to come back to our breath. We're feeling uncomfortable. We're feeling like we're going into a dark place. Taking in the deep inhales, letting yourself exhale, and still through the nose. Because again, every time you do that through your nose, you're tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system, which means now it's a rest and digest versus like flight or fight and shallow or fast. Or like if you notice, anytime you get upset, your breath changes right away. It'll get either very shallow or very fast or very kind of angry. And so the moment we come back, like that's one thing we're really lucky about. Our breath is automated. We don't have to think about it, right? It's our automated nervous system, thankfully. Imagine if we had to think about breathing. We wouldn't be able to do anything. That's all we would be doing, right? Is thinking about breathing.
17,000 times a day.
17,000 times a day. So just imagine. So really breath is everything. Breath, hydration, proper plant foods that heal you. So then when I got diagnosed and I realized I had to create a lot of change in my life, I started relearning everything. I started realizing I need whole foods. I need beans and rice.
Yeah, but now I'm curious. Did you start having symptoms of MS before you were doing all this McDonald's and all that?
I mean, I don't think so, because they say for MS, usually it shows up around 24 years old. And I was literally 24 years old. And so I think, yes, it was there before. There was probably slight symptoms there before. I'm pretty sure that like it impacted me more than I can remember now. But truly waking up one morning and losing 50% of strength was that was like, okay, that was the wake up call, right? That was the blessing in disguise, really. But with all of the, like, of course, I was not feeling good at all. Like, I was not feeling good at all. I was
prior to
being diagnosed. And being diagnosed, I was not feeling good at all. Like, I had literally, yes, I was training. I loved what I was doing in terms of mixed martial arts. But everything else in my life, I was in toxic relationships. I didn't hydrate myself properly. I ate junk food. I didn't even know what meditation meant. Like, I had never heard about meditation. Yes, I was moving my body, but I was getting kicked and punched in the face every day. Probably not the best solution when you have a central nervous system issue, right? Clearly, like, everything in my life was chaos. Everything in my life was chaos. I like to say I was a hot mess. 100%.
So we've got everything pretty much covered in respect to what happened before you went vegan, I think, right?
Yeah.
Now, you've learned to go in the plant-based direction, where you simultaneously learning these other things about your well-being, you know, like breathing and all these other things. Or did that come after you went plant-based?
Everything was definitely a step-by-step process. But see, I didn't go vegan overnight. For me, I initially started for health reasons. I didn't even know the atrocities yet happening to the animals. This was a me, my mind situation where I was like, what can I do? And as I found what was happening with Dr. Swank, as I started doing more research, then I came across documentaries that were about the animals suffering. Then I came across things like Cowspiracy, Forks Over Knives, What the Health. These were the ones like further, like about 10 years ago or whatnot. And that's when I started realizing, that's when I started transitioning to just take everything out of my diet and become fully vegan. And I wasn't even a strict vegan yet, unfortunately, because I went to Thailand, I was fighting out there. And then when my journey for meditation happened, went to Thailand, I had 2 fights in Thailand, 2-0, and unfortunately there was a few places that I wasn't able to accommodate proper protein sources like tofu, for example. So I had to sometimes do cheats like that, which I really did not like, but I wanted to keep my muscle mass and my strength fighting out there. And I hadn't seen enough. I wasn't connecting enough, especially with the fish. Which is interesting because last night, we were talking about do fish feel pain? And of course they do. And it's interesting because I even grew up with Nirvana, and he says, about fish because they don't have any
Nirvana.
feelings. Yes. I don't feel bad.
The bridge.
Exactly. And he says it's okay to eat fish because they don't have any feelings. Something's in the way. So, but literally, like, I grew up thinking that, right? It was even in a song. It was even in artist songs that I loved. So I thought that was true. And so in Thailand, that was in 2014, and I didn't yet feel like on the fish side yet. I would make exceptions once in a while because I wasn't able to provide for my training. But shortly after, I ended up in Thailand, and then I was full vegan. I ended up in Australia, and there I had all of the possible options.
And that's where you went full vegan?
And there I was full vegan. There I went, because what happened is in Thailand, I actually started feeling a little bit of symptoms again.
Oh, wow.
And I started feeling like pain, like I had an invisible line happening in my thigh here going down. And a part of me thinks probably because I was eating animals still.
Oh, and you only had a little bit though, right?
I only had a little bit.
What was it, like fish or what?
It was things like fish or like as Peter Singer spoke of yesterday, like oysters, like things that I thought wouldn't feel as much pain.
Oh, I thought you were going to say loaches.
The what?
Loaches.
Right, because he was talking about the animal liberation. He was talking about the atrocities, like the level of atrocities. And I'm not proud of that either, but I also think it's because I wasn't really still living in alignment with my core values. I think it goes beyond just what you're putting in your body. It goes mindset. Like your mindset is everything. And if I thought that I was still contributing to some of the suffering and I still had enough information for that and I was still fighting and I was doing all of these things that potentially wasn't helping me with my condition, I started feeling symptoms again. And so I ended up going to Australia, which is where I had my my fourth fight, my last fight. And I knew a lot of fighters there because when I was in Montreal training at TriStar, a lot of the pro fighters, a lot of them were also out of Australia. So I went to live with fighter friends out there, started training again, and then the word Vipassana came up. Have you ever heard of, I'll say Vipassana? Because if I say it in a different way, some people might not understand. So Vipassana, it's Vipassana. And so they have centers worldwide. And it's based on silent meditation. You have to do, as a new student, you have to do 10 days. 10 days of silent meditation with you cannot talk, you do not look, there is no journaling, there is no writing, there is no exercising, there is no nothing. You go there and you abandon your body and mind to the practice. And the practice, like Vipassana, is an amazing practice. It's an ancient Indian technique that's been around for thousands of years. And so SN Goenka has all of these recorded discourses, and so every single center has the same theme, basically, and SN Goenka is the one who's delivering the message through his guided meditations. But quite often, he's giving you a bit of guidance. Say, for example, the first 4 days, you're doing Anapana. You're literally focusing on the space beneath your nostrils and above your upper lip, and you sit there almost 12 hours a day. You get to go walk in trails and things like that. You're in the middle of nature, which is amazing because there's nature immersion as well. And you live kind of like a sister or a monk because they feed you as well. So you get to have a little brunch in the morning at like 6 a.m., which is vegetarian. And that's one thing, the last Vipassana, because I've done 4 like that already now, the last one that I've done, I got in a little bit of a heated discussion at the end because, as you can see, what I have on my arm here, may all beings be happy. So I have may all beings be happy y que todos los seres sean felices. So I have it in Spanish because that's my third language, but I want to put it in French, que tous les êtres soient heureux, en français, because that's my first language. And so this is what SN Goenka says at the end of everything. May all beings be happy, free, and in harmony. So to me, if this is what you're preaching, how can this be a vegetarian center, right? We know what happens to dairy. Anyone could just watch Dairy is Scary and they'll find out real quick. Yeah, my last time there, that was a whole other story. But Vipassana is what introduced me into mindset, into breathing, and to understanding just basically my inner being, right? And understanding that like I can tap into myself and I can listen and I can cool and calm myself down. And the beauty behind Anapana is it's teaching you not to react. So, we have biochemical reactions happening in our body all the time. And the thing is how often do we sit down to listen or to pay attention? In silence, right? We might sit down with someone else, have a conversation, we might sit down, watch TV, read a book, do this, do work, edit. But at the end of the day, we rarely just sit to pay attention to what's happening in our body. So this is like you spend 4 days observing whatever sensation will arise here. And the whole idea is that whatever arises also passes away. Just like our life, right? Just like anything. You could look out at a river and it looks exactly the same, but every second it's changed. Everything underneath it has changed, right? Maybe there's still the same rock underneath there that hasn't moved, but the water has all changed. The fish have changed. Whatever was passing through have changed. It's an ebb and flow, right? And that's life. That's life. So you realize that as you sit there and you observe, and it's like you're in a constant battle with yourself because you want to go to the past, you want to go to the future, you don't want to stay present. Our brain knows very well that if we stay present, it's almost like we're equipping ourselves for success. But if we go to the past, then we could reminisce and feel depressed. If we go to the future, then we could get anxiety and start thinking too much about what's going to happen. Whereas the whole goal of this practice is to center yourself, to come back, and even if something arises, you just observe and you remain equanimous. And the beauty of this equanimity, I didn't even know that word before I went there.
I don't even think I've heard it.
I had never heard equanimity or equanimous. And SN Goenka says this the entire time, and it's about having like this objective kind of perception. So you're not being reactive. It's being non-reactive, right? That's basically the definition of being equanimous, is being non-reactive. You're staying neutral. You're simply observing. So even if this crazy itch comes, and rather than just scratch it and keep going, you simply observe. And you're not controlling your breath. You're not actually controlling your breath. It's not big inhales and deep exhales. It's literally just you're allowing whatever natural breath to occur, and you observe whatever sensations arise.
You know what that reminds me of? Like sometimes when I'm at home and I'm editing, I'll take a break, I'll go out in the garden and I try to do this like in my boxers so I can get sunshine, you know?
Yes.
And I'm out there and I'm like totally in the zone, and then all of a sudden I'm getting attacked by mosquitoes. and it's like, for some reason, I just let it happen.
That is Vipassana right there. That's teaching yourself to not react. That's literally like, and the beauty with that is the more you practice, the easier it is to deal with life after.
Yeah.
Because life is a challenge, right? Life is a challenge. There will always be challenges. So if you can teach yourself like to have a mosquito and not swat the mosquito, if you could teach yourself to have an itch and not scratch the itch, you'll realize that sooner or later it's gone. It's not going to bother you anymore. But if your attention goes and you focus on that, it's going to amplify.
That reminds me of something else too. I used to smoke also.
Oh, interesting.
I was a mental health counselor for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, why can't I quit this? And so I was like, well, let me just practice what I preach on myself. And so I implemented some neuro-linguistic programming, some self-actualizing affirmations. One of the biggest things was, knowing that urge is just a fleeting moment.
Yes.
And everything I'm telling myself is a false truth. It's not even,
100%.
that enabled me.
To quit smoking.
Yeah, easy.
Same thing. So, listen, my story with smoking was ridiculous. So, but at the end of the day, what you just said there is the law of impermanence. The law of impermanence. And that's literally what SN Goenka teaches, right? It's that exactly. Everything arises and passes away. And if you choose where your attention goes is where the focus will flow, right? So if there's too much attention on one thing that's not pleasant, it's going to become more and more unpleasant. But if you choose to just let it go, next thing you know, it's gone. So it's really, really cool. And those principles to quit smoking was the same. So when I got diagnosed, I quit for like a year. I quit all alcohol, I quit cigarette, I quit all of that. And then slowly I was kind of cheating again. I was kind of taking little puffs. I wasn't buying my pack, but I would literally buy a cigarette off someone for $2. I'd be like, just one cigarette, because that was my justification, right? Like one a day, once every second day. Like I would just find a bit of reassurance doing that.
I did the same thing, and I feel like it makes
it worse.
Yeah, it was like,
sure.
It was like, oh my God, this is so nasty. I'm coughing and just like.
100%.
Yeah.
So I agree. So I knew that I really needed to, and so I was studying at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, and I was carpooling with this girl. I would pick her up in the morning and bring her to school, and she was a smoker. So I was in a phase there that I wasn't smoking, but then she'd come into my car and I could smell it, and I just eventually, and it smells so gross.
Yeah.
Like now I'm like, nasty.
Like you won't even let her in your car now.
But no, now that's it. No, it's not happening. But back then I was like, and then I was like, do we share one? And then we'd share a cigarette, right? And then I would have my whole thing because I'm
Bonding
going into
moment.
the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. My essential oil spray, my gum, I'd wash my hands. It was like a whole thing, right? Yeah. And so one day I decided, you know what? I'm going to go to hypnotherapy clinic. It had worked for me for 1 month in Montreal. I had a spirit guide after I was diagnosed and all this stuff, and he really helped me work through some stuff with hypnotism. And cigarettes was one of them, but after a month, I had started traveling and I started again. And so I walked into this hypnotherapy clinic, and this guy told me, he said, after we spoke and all that, he was trying to sell me a $2,000 package, and he said, Michelle, you know that you need me. And that was it. That's all I needed to hear. The moment he told me, you know that you need me, everything downloaded in my brain. Like I had already made so many changes, Jeff, like thousands of changes in regards to my own personal health and empowering myself. This was the last thing. It was my last little culprit, you know? And so when he said that, it just hit me. It was like an epiphany. I was like, I don't need anyone. I need myself. I need myself. I need to come back to that mindset and be like, no, you're not losing your best friend. You're literally losing someone that's causing a lot of harm in your life. And that's causing all this dependence, and that's causing you to think all the time about it, even when you're not doing it. Like, it's not good. It's an addiction, right? So I left that clinic. I had a pack at that point. I threw it out, and I have never touched a cigarette since. Wow. And that was just in November 9th, 2017. So that wasn't too far ago. Oh, wow. That was 5 years, which means that my lungs haven't even completely rejuvenated. Yeah. Because it takes 7 years for all of the tissues.
15. Is it 7?
7. Oh. 7 years for all of the tissues in our body to regenerate. After 30 years old, though, it might take longer. No. After 30 years old, it could start taking longer. But I quit at the age of 30. I had promised myself my whole life that I would not smoke past the age of 30. Because they say that once you pass that phase, that age, it's kind of like a non-return. And I was too afraid. So I was like, you know what? No. And so just like that, just like anything else, at the end of the day, mindset is everything. And we can change anything if we want to.
You know, another thing I did that I just want to interject real quick because I'm curious what you would say in response is I noticed other people that would try to quit around me, they would talk about it all the time. And it was an excuse for being like unhappy or miserable or mean or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like, so one of the biggest things I felt like I did also was just, I didn't tell anybody I quit smoking. I just didn't. Even if I felt like I just didn't. I didn't really feel like it too much after a while, but and then a month went by, 2 months, and they were still like relapsing and talking about it. And I just quit talking about it. I wanted to emulate a non-smoker, and they don't talk about it.
So this is exactly it. So you are onto something. So basically, it's identity, right? If you identify yourself as a smoker, it's going to be really hard. And if you're talking about it all the time, it's going to be really hard. But so for example, for me, I was hiding it, right? So I didn't tell anyone either. I was hiding it. No one knew I was smoking. So it was like I would even finish at the gym and I would cross over because I could see the gym from my room because I was right beside, like I'm really good at like structuring myself where I live and what I do. And I would sit down on my balcony so no one could see me. And I would smoke a cigarette in like hiding,
you know? I hid it too.
So I definitely did not tell anyone. But so I did very similar to you. I didn't talk about it, but I had a cheat sheet. I had a cheat sheet with all of the things that I could do if I had an urge to smoke a cigarette. So I had take 5 deep breaths, sit down and meditate, chug a big glass of water, write something, text a friend. Like I had all of these, I had about 10, a list of 10 things that I could do instead of smoke. And you know these cheat sheets that you have in class? Like I was studying at IHN then, so I had all these little cheat sheets. And so I wrote all of that on and I just kept it on me all the time. And it's funny because after that, I ended up, because I teach mindful communication now, which is based on NVC, nonviolent communication, I used the similar technique when I first started trying to transition my vocabulary into so it's how you are able to communicate with people and things you can ask. And when you look at your feelings and needs, right? So I have a huge list. So I put the key feelings and needs that happen or the needs that I need for myself. And I wrote them all down so that I could express that. So I could check the list and I could remember the names and the words because it takes time. We weren't taught that. We were not taught how to communicate from a needs and feelings perspective. We were raised in a society based on punishment and reward. And you're good or you're bad. You did this, you're good. You did that, you're bad. And you did this, you go to jail. You did this, you get a reward. So this is like, we've been taught this, good or bad, and we need to be on our best behavior. We need to act like someone else wants us to act, right? So we haven't been taught how to talk about our own needs, how to talk about what we actually need and how we feel. We've actually been taught to suppress those feelings, to not really speak them, right? To not really speak our truth. And depending on the environment we grew up in, for sure. And I don't want to say like my parents were actually amazing role models to certain extents. They did smoke, monkey see, monkey do. They did drink, monkey see, monkey do. I had to get rid of all those things. But they did teach me incredible values. Like you don't steal, you don't lie, you treat others the way you want to be treated, which is why my whole family's plant-based now, right?
Oh, wow.
My sister's vegan, full vegan. She's been for like 5 years now. And my parents are plant-based. My mom is pretty much vegan and my dad is more plant-based. Like he's by default. Right? Sometimes if he's out of the house, he'll do his own thing. But I think we've guilt-tripped him enough that he doesn't really do that anymore. Yeah, 100%. But yeah.
You know, I think a lot of the, you know, it may be to anybody watching this, like, why are they talking about smoking? But all of this applies to veganism as well. Because, I mean, smoking is probably, in a lot of ways, at least for a transient moment, it's harder than giving up eating animals for a transient moment, I think, you know.
I agree.
But the physiological addiction is only like 48 hours. The rest is just mental, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to eating animals, though, there's a lot more social pressure. There is, you know, the familial pressures that apparently you were able to overcome by having supportive and family members that are going this way too. So
I wasn't that way at first.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years now.
So a lot of times I like to go there as well. Like, well, so what does your family think of this, and how has that, you know, how has that maybe changed if it has?
So, initially it was rough because you have to remember I was diagnosed with MS, right? So my parents didn't understand that I didn't want to follow my medical doctor's advice. They didn't understand that I wanted to go against the grain. They were like, "Oh my God, she's going to Thailand. She's doing," like they were like, "What is happening to our daughter?" Do you know what I mean? And they live, so my parents I come from Temiskaming. It's like a 2,000 population town, border Ontario, but it's in Quebec. And so at that point, I was living in Montreal. And they were, like, I had to drive to go see my parents. And it'd take me like 7 to 8 hours to get there. And if it wasn't a snowstorm, 13 hours, you know? Because in Quebec, it gets serious. It's nothing like the south of Ontario where I am now. But yeah, so I ended up telling them, like, at first, I would go home. And I would be okay with, well, not I would be okay, but I would let them, you know, I remember the first Christmas that I was there, they put a turkey on the table. And it was like, but it still didn't hit me that much because I was still like new. Do you know? It wasn't that, it's only as the years went by that it got like more and more. And eventually I told them, I'm like, I just hope you know that I'm not going to come home if you're going to be serving animals. And that was that real quick. My mom said, okay, we'll make everything vegan. And yes, and at that point, shortly after I took the Liberation Pledge, because I was able to kind of use that as an excuse to make, like, people who would invite me somewhere and I would say, I'm so sorry, like, I took the Liberation Pledge and I don't sit with people who eat animals, but I'm okay to go to a vegan restaurant. Can we change it to go there? And it always gave me a good way to swoop in and get people to change, well, not to change their habits and to make an exception and to come, right? So that was excellent on that end. And the same thing happened with my family. I was lucky that I live further away, that I could kind of use that as a bit of a guilt trip initially. But eventually they realized, like, oh my God, I saw this Instagram story not too long ago. This guy's putting a vegan apron on and he just looks at the camera and he goes, "You think vegan food is not tasty? You just don't know how to cook." And he walks off. And that's the truth. Like, it's the truth. Like, vegan food is delicious if you know how to cook, if you're using flavors. Like, if you think about it, what we do to animal, what we do to flesh is we add vegan food to it. We add vegan sauces, vegan flavors, vegan, like, we don't...
Herbs and spices.
Yes, like, that's what makes it so amazing. Like, no one's just gonna, again, like, we're not carnivores, so we're not just gonna run after an animal and try to bite them raw, which is what carnivores do, right? We've learned how to kind of do things our own way, which at the end of the day, again, we're preparing it in all these vegetables, sauces and spices and everything to make it smell and taste delicious. So why not just cut the middleman out and go to plants only, right? It just makes everything better for everyone. So
back to MS. Have you heard of Srey Stancic? Dr. Srey Stancic.
I have not.
So the first time I ever came across somebody that had MS. I was videoing her presentation, and she also was able to overcome it with plants. And it's actually on my channel. It's an old video, 3 or 4 years old.
Cool.
You might
I'll go
wanna
check that out for sure.
Did you find certain plant foods help more?
100%. So it's funny, you know, there was this, what was her name? I think Miley Cyrus recently that was like on Joe Rogan, or maybe a while back, but she was like, oh, I needed to eat fish, my omega-3s. And like yes, omega-3s are really important.
Like in an intracellular level, they're talking to her, hey, give us fish.
But no, they were like, hey, give us
killing us.
omega-3s. And you can get that through like your nuts and seeds, right? Like it's so...
alpha-linolenic acid. But these people just never go to a nutritionist or a dietitian or anybody who knows anything about nutrition. They just kind of do this armchair research.
Well, you know what happens is I think before we go vegan, no one cares about what you're eating.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just remember, it's like before you go vegan, no one cares. You could be eating at McDonald's every day. No one's gonna say anything, right? For the most part. And then the moment you go vegan, all of a sudden everyone becomes a nutritionist and everyone cares. Like, oh, what are you gonna do? Where are you gonna get your protein? What's gonna happen this? How are you gonna get? And it's like, okay, let's just like, we actually have a fiber crisis right now. We don't have a protein crisis, we have a fiber crisis. Most people are constipated in our world, okay? Because they don't have enough fiber, because they're just eating all of this excess animal protein or animal products, and they're stuck. They're all stuck, they're all constipated.
Acidic, not alkaline.
It's super acidic, and we thrive on an alkaline diet, and that, like, literally, our pH is 7.4. So it's a little bit higher than neutral, right? And it's on the alkaline side. So if you look at the chart, like all of the meats and dairies and all that, they're on the acidic side. And all of like and beans are a little bit more on the acidic side too, and things like that, and grains.
I wonder if they are when they're sprouted.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, which is more natural.
I personally don't think so, because I eat sprouts all the time. Like I sprout everything and I love it. Like my lentils, my mung beans, my zucchis, like everything. I love it. I'm lucky. I get a service called Simple Sprouts and he does it for me. I'm really lucky. I get vegan catering. I get sprouts to me. I take like my health products that are called Purium, and it's like shakes and amino acids. And it's like every time I have a shake, it's like the equivalent to 6 salads. I used to cook. When I first got diagnosed, oh my God, I taught myself to do everything. Like I actually learned to cook rice. Like I didn't even know how to cook rice. Let's understand this, okay? So this is the thing. Like it was sad. So I literally taught myself to cook again, or to cook finally. And my mom was a great cook. So it's like, I don't know why I didn't pick up on her influence. But now, so for years I cooked. I cooked for myself, and I'd pack everything, and I'd even like, again, I would go to my parents' house and I couldn't even stop at an en route. There was nothing there for me. So for a 7, 8, 9 hour road trip, I had to pack my own lunch. I had to do all these things. And again, there weren't very many vegan options back then either. So I was doing everything. Now though, in 2022, oh my God, I'm so lucky. Like the person that I met in my hometown in Oakville, she's amazing. So I went to school with her at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, and her catering is called Savor Living. She's really good. She delivers, it's like Meals on Wheels. It's all mainly organic. It's really good quality food. It's very fresh. And she's helping people transition, right? Because she also gives like the meat alternatives. She also gives like the substitute. Like she really makes it, she makes people feel like they're getting comfort food, right? And it's very satisfying, and it's very nutritious. So it's excellent. So this is a service I use now because I lack of time. And it's like priorities, right? This right now, making my own food is not a priority. Getting to as many people as possible, working on my business, and doing activism, those are my priorities right now.
What's your business?
So my business is I Love Balance. And if you just go to I as in third eye chakra, lovebalance.com. I'm a personal trainer. I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'm the founder of I Love Balance. And the entire goal is to teach people how to move, how to stretch, how to meditate, and how to address their mindset. Wow. How to find purpose in their lives. I apply what I preach 100% in every possible way. And I think that that's the way that we get to influence people as much as possible, when they see that you walk the talk. When they're like, I want to be like her. Like, this person has so much energy. She's all over the place. She's doing all these wonderful things. She's helping others in so many different ways. And that is my goal. That's my mission. That's what I enjoy doing. And I've seen so many people help themselves in so many different ways. But most of the time it's by going vegan. Like that's when whole food vegan, that's when they really start feeling the difference. Like, yes, the movement, yes, the breathing, yes, the exercising, yes, addressing your mindset, but all of those go hand in hand and they help you transition and move away from eating animals, which is like, you know, we live in a carnist world. It's hard. Like you said, we mentioned smoking. Smoking already has the all of the packs. It has everything on it. Like if only we could have a meat tax, you know, that showed like all of the warnings of how carcinogenic it is.
We have them. You just have to go to PETA and order that little sticker you put on the...
I do that sometimes. I actually have the stack at home. That's so funny. Shh, I don't do that. I'm not the person doing that in Oakville, okay? Not the person doing that. Someone else from my team, maybe.
No, what else do you do besides your business?
Well, that's the thing. So with my business, I do private clients, I do my online membership. And then apart from that, I have my Light Up the City campaign. So we actually use projectors and spotlights to go all over cities and we put animal agriculture is killing our planet. That's the stance that we have for now for our spotlight. But with our projector, we've been doing different videos. Like, for example, we went to Simu Liu. Do you know who that is? He's like an up-and-coming actor. He's Canadian, but he's huge. And so they endorsed him it's a company that sells fur, okay? And so, Nobis. So we got to Nobis and we plastered him and his dog and all of like how he loves animals and like why? Why would you partner up with a company? So he saw all of that because there was lineup of people coming to his book signing and all that. And he announced to all of his fans that he did not believe in fur, that he did love his dog, and that he only signed this with a contract with Nobis saying that he would never wear fur. But it's like, why are you still signing a contract with them though? If you're not in alignment with their brand, why, right? So that's where I talk about walking the talk. Like I would have never done that. I would have made sure to tell them, you get rid of fur and I will sign, right? That's it. So, but it's okay, that was huge. They still are selling fur right now. But we're campaigning them, and as you know, we've campaigned Canada Goose dropped fur, Saks Fifth Avenue dropped fur, Hudson Bay dropped fur, Moose Knuckles dropped fur, so many. Dolce & Gabbana, like so many groups.
Animal safe too?
Yes, 100%. Not just animal safe, but all of the different, like we have a fur-free organization in Toronto. And so they helped us get rid of all the fur. Like I've been a part of so many campaigns, okay? Right now, the reason I'm here now is because I endorsed the Plant-Based Treaty and I'm a part of the Animal Save movement, but they have their own branch, which is the Plant-Based Treaty. And the whole goal with the Plant-Based Treaty is you can get vegans and non-vegans to sign and endorse and show their support. And the more support we get, the more signatures we get, the easier it is to actually, like our councillors then sign, cities then sign, then we're showing the majority vote that we're taking this seriously. And then we could actually implement subsidies, we could implement incentives, we could implement programs and affiliations to make sure that we are transitioning to a juster system, which is moving away from animal agriculture and moving towards plant-based subsidies instead. LA last week finally endorsed. And like, again, we've got so many business. So you could endorse as an individual, you could endorse as an organization, you could endorse as a business, you could endorse as a city. And we have so many resources. Like if you looked at that website, plantbasedtreaty.org, it's amazing. There's so many resources. You could start campaigns in your own towns, in your own cities. Like we're really there. Like we want to move. We're trying to create teams everywhere. Like I met this girl just a few days ago at the booth and she's from Philly and she doesn't know any vegans. She's been vegan for 5 years and knows no vegans in Philly. And I go, and she's like, I want to get involved, but I don't know how. Like I haven't really looked at the groups. So we invited her to our Friday call and we're going to introduce her on how she could start a plant-based treaty team out there. And then we have connections. Like, the Animal Safe movement has 1,000 chapters worldwide. It's a global organization and they're amazing. So with my membership, with the I Love Balance, they have a corporate membership as well that they offer to their activists. So, we get to move, we get to stretch, we get to meditate. And on Sundays, I get to teach the mindful communication, which is based on NBC, which is to help us with compassion fatigue, which is to help us lead by example, to help us move our bodies. And again, when we're doing outreach and we're getting people to endorse and support, like we look the part, right? People want to be a part of that. They're like, yes. And most people want to belong. I grew up feeling like I didn't belong. I was in a 2,000 population town where there were hunters and trappers. I could see skinned animals hanging out of people's garage. People would go hunt. They would chop the head off, put it on the front of their truck, and go downtown with blood still leaking down and honk to show their kill. Like, this is the kind of barbaric town I was raised in. Like, from a young age, I wanted to take my life. I did not feel like I belonged. Like, I needed to leave that town. And when I left that, and I could say that back then, I was taught to be racist. Like, I was in this like white supremacist type of town and was taught to be racist. I hung around with people that said really bad words, and I thought it to be true until I finally got out of it and moved to Montreal and was in this like multi-ethnical city and like meeting all these awesome people and realizing we're all the same, just like with animals, right?
And I think a big part of why people maybe fail is because of what you're saying there.
They don't have support.
They don't have the community, yeah. You think maybe you could have done something there?
Yes, and I have, because I've helped my mom go vegan, and my mom
she lives there still.
She lives in Temiskaming.
Oh, okay.
She's impacted. So the manager of IGDA is now vegan. He's been bringing in all of these different vegan options and products and things in the only grocery store we have in that town. Wow. And then we celebrated the 100th anniversary of Temiskaming, and she got a whole vegan menu on board, and there was like the by default. So there was like the other option as well, but there was all vegan as well, and tons of options which we would have never seen before, okay? Everything would have been like mayo, cheese, like everything would have just been animal based, okay? Like, so this was incredible. Like, so there are amazing changes happening, and I didn't even have to go in there yet. I didn't even have to go in there yet, let's say, okay? Yet, because of course this is a plan for me.
So you went outside of there, got empowered and invigorated, and then you interjected it back through your mom.
Through everywhere. I am connected and I network with people everywhere, right? That's why I was telling you about that Philly girl. It's like, listen, we'll set you up. And same for you, we might be able to look at North Carolina and see activists we have out there that would be willing to start a team and start doing things, right? And it could be as simple as going to record. You could be recording them doing certain things or actions, or like you said, potentially not disruptions, depending. But at the end, like, there's a way, and there's people everywhere. And that's one thing with the plant-based treaty. I always ask, I go, are you vegan? And if they say yes, now for sure in the back of my mind, I'm going to recruit them. And if they say no, I say, but you know someone who's vegan. And in 2022, everyone knows someone who's vegan. So they're like, yeah, my mom, yeah, my sister, yeah, my uncle, yeah, my cousin, yeah, my friend's friend, yeah. Like, everyone knows someone. And I'm like, wouldn't you want them to have options? And then boom, all of us, it's like NBC, we want to make someone else's life more wonderful. So of course they want them to have options. Like, we're not trying to like ruin someone else's life. We just sometimes are really stuck in that cognitive dissonance and that desensitization and the conditioning, right? And we think like, oh, like it's weird when someone does something different to us. But really when we come back to kind of, well, wouldn't you want them to be able to choose? Wouldn't you want them to have more options as well? Wouldn't you want and a lot of people do it for health reasons too, right? So it's like, most people are like, yeah, I would. So it's like, okay, well, you're on board. Please endorse the plant-based treaty. And then they do. And then we get their email list and so it's a really nice process because, again, I haven't even addressed my city yet because I want to have the step-by-step. I want to kind of see what's going to happen with Los Angeles right now, how we're going to be able to implement things, and then from there, and even New York with Mayor Eric Adams and the whole shabam. So once I start seeing those examples, then I'm taking it and I'm building it, because I'm connected. Like, my foot's in, but now I just need to have the plan. I need to have the step-by-step process, because we know if we want things to actually start changing, we need to finger. Definitely not finger. We need to spoon feed. We definitely not need to finger feed.
Can I keep that in there?
Yeah, you can keep that in there for sure. I love bloopers. So yes, we need to spoon feed people into doing the right thing and into making those changes, right? So the more we have like the step-by-step process and how we could address, and like for example in New York, where they've now all of the hospitals are going to have the kind of greener by default where it's like vegan, and then, oh, maybe you could have that animal option, right? But most people, they've proven, and as I've seen in the presentations, most people stick to the vegan option. Most people are followers. They just kind of want it done for themselves, right? So boom, they'll stick to that. They're not really going to wander more. And that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing even with the plant-based treaty. The more we have those step-by-step processes, the more cities we get to transition, then we're just leading by example everywhere, and we're just going to be like combusting everywhere, like it was like a...
And then you'll be able to go back to your city with some heavy arsenal.
100%. And this is just a 2,000 population town. The one I live in now, Oakville, that we're like 400,000, right? And it's the richest city in Canada with tons of affluential people. So that's why right now I'm like waiting, you know? I'm waiting to see what's going to happen everywhere else. And then I'm going in there, like you said, full armed.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I've imagined myself doing that. You know, I do everything I can to get out of my city and do what I'm doing right now here in DC.
Yeah.
I was just in Texas, and before that I was in Iowa, Chicago, and Detroit. Before that I was in Ohio.
Yeah.
So I'm just constantly all over the place. And I'm like, eventually I'll figure out a way to bring it back, or I'll just get out of there for good.
Yeah. You know? And that's the thing though, like you're discovering, you're exploring, you're going into places that are more progressive, and then you're accumulating knowledge and ways and solutions to be able to bring back, right? Like just know, like everything, like our experiment, like the fact that we're able to experience these things in other places and see what's happening, then we accumulate that knowledge and we could apply it. Because knowledge is power, but it's not if you don't apply it. Applied knowledge is power. So that's huge. Like what you're doing right now is like, don't get discouraged, because at the end of the day, you, like you said, you're literally ammuniting yourself to be able to go back and be like, boom, you know, this is happening right now, guys, whether you like it or not.
Could you be with somebody who isn't vegan?
Oh, we're going to have a very interesting conversation here. So I have helped switch so many men to being vegan. Because I would never be able to be with a non-vegan. I cannot. First of all, I've been vegan for so long now, I can't even exchange liquids with someone that I think has animal flesh in their mouth. Is like, oh, like it just grosses me out so much. So no, I would never be able to. So one of the things though is because I'm single, anyway, let's not get into detail with that. But in the past few years, I've been single, and because I'm very active and I don't really have time to date, but I take the time. I go on dating sites. I go and I make a point. Every person that approaches me, I outreach them. So I literally use dating to outreach people. But I don't even necessarily go to a restaurant with them. I literally outreach them from our conversation on dating websites and stuff, right? I give them my first question is like, so how do you feel about living a vegan lifestyle? That's my first question, okay? And in my profile, I'm very adamant about like vegans only or open to being vegan. Like I wrote all that. And some people don't read the profile. So my first question is always like, are you open to living a vegan lifestyle, or how do you feel about living a vegan lifestyle? And depending on their answer, is the direction that I'm going. So if they're closed, we're clearly never gonna be dating each other, but I will give different documentaries to watch. I'm always giving a call to action. So, and I'm on so many of those websites. I literally on a daily basis am constantly outreaching people through dating, right? Like I'm using a little bit of my women powering skills to help people. And every man that I have been in relationships with, the moment we start dating, if they're not vegan, of course they're open to being already, we've covered that part, and then I help them transition right away. I set them up right away. So I'm not even gonna exchange a kiss with you until you're vegan. That's funny. Yeah. So, and after that, I have a good ratio, because after that, they stay vegan. Nice. So even after I'm like, okay, well, we did our journey, have fun. No, I'm kidding. They stay vegan, and then they help other people. Like, think about it. Every single person you help go vegan impacts 777 other people. It's the ripple effect. You talk to one person,
7 degrees
they're
separation.
Gonna change.
Is that related to 7 degrees separation somehow? I wonder.
I'm not sure.
Because they're all sevens.
I don't even know. Honestly, I heard that number and it's stuck in my head forever in a talk, and I don't even remember when, but I thought, and I looked it up, and it's true. When you just think of the ripple effect. You talk to one person, okay? Do you know how many people, I've been vegan now for X amount of time. Do you know how many people, like for sure more than 777 in my lifetime already, right?
That you've talked to, yeah.
Not even just talk to, like I talk to hundreds of people, but I help many people transition to veganism, and every single one of those people talk to other people, they help people transition to be vegan, these vegan people help people transition to be vegan, these people, like, it's a ripple effect. It's a ripple effect, and we tend to stop and forget sometimes how much impact we truly have. How much we can not only empower ourselves, but empower others. We really can, right? Like it's a choice at the end of the day.
Now, you have a quote you want to share?
Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right either way. And that is the reality of everything, whether it's mindset related, whether it's, eating animals. Like if you think you can't do it, you won't be able to do it. If you think you can though, and you change that mindset, it's the same when we're talking about smoking, right? You don't identify anymore. You're not a person who eats animal. You're not a person who smokes. You're literally a person who eats plants. You're a person who's smoke-free. You don't have to think about those things, right? Because you can.
I like that. Self-fulfilling prophecy. And at the end of the day, people want evidence. Obviously, it's possible. What future do we want to foster? Do we want to foster food forests and gardens that support diverse ecosystems, or do we want to support slaughterhouses?
And that's it. So to me, exactly like you said, people are always looking. I'm very much of a logical and rational person. So to me, it's just illogical. Why would we choose to go towards, like you said, the violence, the slaughtering, the killing, the pain, the hurt, the suffering, when we can go towards life, towards thriving, towards growing, towards feeding our soul, our mind, our body? Like, why would we choose to hurt others when we don't have to? It's so simple. So every single day we have a choice. We have a choice. And at the end of the day, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right either way. So make that good choice, that positive choice. Like, I want schools to have gardens. I want schools to, we need to be teaching kids how to grow their own food, how to become self-sustainable. And then if we had gardens in every single school, we would be able to give that food to the community. We would be able to teach kids the values of sharing, of giving, of just literally, they can teach self-sustainability. They teach respect for all life. They learn what it's like to eat delicious foods. And then they get to share and give back to the people that need it, right? And then whatever's left over could go to maybe people that don't need it. But at the end, because there's just such an amazing abundance. When you start growing proper food, like the abundance is incredible, right? So it's really, really exciting.